The American Old West was a land where legends were born at the pull of a trigger. Among the dusty streets and lawless frontiers, a fearless few rose to become the deadliest gunslingers history has ever known. In this countdown, we'll reveal the top 15 who carved their names into Western lore with speed, skill, and unshakable nerve. Each one left behind a story so unbelievable, you'll wonder how they were ever real. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more thrilling tales from the wild frontier. And let us know in the comments which gunslinger on this list captures your imagination the most. Number 15. William Brocius. They called him Curly Bill for a reason. The thick, unruly black curls that announced him before he ever spoke. A larger-than-life presence, he moved through Tombstone with the confidence of a man who knew the territory and the people who ran it. After Old Man Clanton's death, Curly Bill emerged as a central figure among the cowboys, the loose network of cattle thieves and border riders that haunted Arizona's frontier. Contemporary accounts place him near the top of their pecking order, whether or not there was a formal leader. For a time, he even worked on the right side of the ledger, reportedly collecting taxes under Cochise County Sheriff John Behan, a reminder that lines on the frontier were often blurred. Curly Bill was known to enjoy his liquor, and when he did, his personality grew even larger. One late night, Marshal Fred White asked him to hand over his pistol. As Curly Bill complied, the weapon discharged and struck White. On his deathbed, White, who was friendly with Curly Bill, told witnesses he believed the shooting was accidental. Wyatt Earp testified in Curly Bill's defense, and a court acquitted him. Months later, Earp and Curly Bill met again near Iron Springs. The encounter proved final for Brocius, and most contemporary reports credit Earp with ending his run. In his October 1881 journal, George Parsons captured the moment's mood, calling Curly Bill Arizona's most famous outlaw. Number 14. Klay Allison. Klay Allison was known for his unpredictable personality and fiery temper, earning him a place among the most infamous figures of the American frontier. He served in the Confederate Army during the Civil War, but a head injury led to erratic behavior that persisted after his discharge. Many historians believe this injury explains some of his most shocking and extreme actions, which quickly built his reputation across the West. Stories about Allison's life include dramatic confrontations and a number of gunfights with other well-known gunslingers. One of the most famous incidents involved outlaw Chunk Colbert. After sharing a meal together, Colbert reportedly drew his weapon, and Allison acted in self-defense. When later asked why he had dined with a man who wished him harm, Allison replied with his now famous remark, "I wouldn't want to send a man to hell on an empty stomach." Despite living a life full of peril and constant conflict, Allison's end was surprisingly ordinary. In 1887, he died after falling from a wagon and breaking his neck. His gravestone reportedly carries the simple but telling words, "Klay Allison, gentleman, gunfighter." He never killed a man that did not need killing. Klay Allison remains one of the most talked about characters of the Old West, a man whose life balanced between charm, danger, and legend. Number 13. Sam Bass, outlaw. Sam Bass's story began with honest intentions. After leaving the care of an abusive uncle, he found work at a sawmill in Mississippi, determined to build a better life on his own terms. Chasing a dream of becoming a cowboy, he eventually made his way to Texas. But after one season on the range, Bass decided the life of a cowboy wasn't for him. In 1876, he teamed up with a rugged companion named Joel Collins to drive a herd of longhorns north, where cattle fetched higher prices. The drive brought in about $8,000, but instead of returning to Texas to repay the herd's owners, the two kept the profits for themselves. They soon lost it all in the gambling halls of Deadwood. Looking for another venture, Bass and Collins tried their hand at stagecoach robbery. Despite 7 attempted holdups, the returns were small, and they soon aimed for bigger stakes. Their boldest move came when they targeted the Union Pacific Gold Train from San Francisco, taking more than $60,000. Still remembered as the largest single robbery in the railroad's history, Bass's whirlwind career came to an end in Round Rock, Texas, when he was wounded during an attempted bank heist. He passed away 2 days later, on his 27th birthday, leaving behind a brief but unforgettable legend of the Old West. Number 12. Jim Miller, outlaw. They called him Deacon Jim James Miller because he faithfully attended church and avoided smoking or drinking, an image of calm respectability that masked a far darker reputation. Despite his pious appearance, Miller became known as one of the most feared hired gunmen in the Old West. He was even said to openly declare that he would eliminate anyone for the right price, with fees ranging from about $150 to as high as $2,000. An extraordinary sum at the time. Miller's preferred tactic was stealth. He often struck under the cover of night while wearing a black frock coat that helped him blend into the darkness. Hidden beneath that coat was a steel breastplate, an early form of body armor, giving him an edge over anyone who tried to strike back. While historians can confirm at least 14 killings linked to him, rumors once claimed the number was closer to 50. His downfall came in Oklahoma, where he was accused of murdering A.O. Gus Bobbitt. Before a trial could be held, a mob removed Miller and 3 others from jail and took them to an abandoned stable to be hanged. Calm to the end, he made 2 final requests: that his wedding ring be sent to his wife, a cousin of John Wesley Hardin, and that he be allowed to keep his hat on. With the words, "Let her rip," Miller stepped from the box himself, ending his own life on his own terms. The 4 bodies were left suspended for hours until a photographer arrived to capture the grim scene, a haunting final image of a man who lived by a strange code of faith and fear. Number 11, the Sundance Kid. They called him the Sundance Kid, but he was born Henry Longabaugh. He earned the famous nickname after being caught and convicted of stealing a horse in Sundance, Wyoming, where he spent time behind bars. Although often portrayed as a feared gunman, there's no confirmed evidence that he ever took a life. That mystery has only fueled his legend. After leaving jail in 1896, Longabaugh teamed up with Robert Leroy Parker, better known as Butch Cassidy, to form the notorious Wild Bunch. Their gang went on to pull off the longest series of successful train and bank robberies in American history, captivating the public and confounding the law. As the Pinkerton Detective Agency closed in, Sundance, Cassidy, and Etta Place fled to Argentina to escape the relentless pursuit. Official reports say Sundance was killed during a confrontation in Bolivia. Yet whispers of his survival have never fully faded. Some family members insist he returned quietly to the U.S., living under the name William Henry Long in Duchesne, Utah, until his death in 1936. His remains have since been exhumed for DNA analysis, an ongoing effort to solve one of the Old West's most enduring mysteries. Number 10, Belle Starr. She was born Myra Maybelle Shirley in Carthage, Missouri, and from an early age showed remarkable promise. At the Carthage Female Academy, she excelled in her studies and became an accomplished pianist. A young woman of grace and refinement, Maybelle grew up alongside Cole Younger and later formed close ties with Jesse James and Frank James. When members of the James Younger gang needed a safe place to hide, they often sought refuge at the Shirley family farm. It was in this world of outlaws and secrecy that she found herself drawn into a life of crime, earning the legendary nickname Belle Starr, the Bandit Queen. In 1866, she married Jim Reed, a former Confederate guerrilla. Reed tried his hand at honest farming, but when that failed, he became involved with the Starr family, a Cherokee clan known for horse theft. Alongside Belle's old friends, the James and Younger brothers, Reed joined in planning several ambitious heists. Reed's life ended abruptly when he was killed while attempting to escape custody after an arrest for robbery. Left widowed, Belle turned her talents to organizing and planning robberies and fencing stolen goods. Known for her charm and cunning, she could sometimes sway local lawmen through persuasion or influence when bribes weren't enough. In 1880, Belle married Sam Starr. 2 years later, both were convicted of horse theft, serving about a year before returning to their old ways. Belle's story came to a sudden and mysterious end on February 3, 1889. just 2 days shy of her 41st birthday, when she was fatally shot from behind while riding home from a general store. Her killer was never identified, leaving the legend of the Bandit Queen shrouded in mystery to this day. Number 9. Bill Doolin. He was born William M. Doolin in 1858 in Johnson County, Arkansas, the son of Michael Doolin and Artemina Beller Doolin. By his early 20s, the restless young man set out west, searching for work and purpose on the open frontier. In 1881, at the age of 23, Doolin found steady work as a cowboy on the Cimarron River in Indian Territory at the HX Bar Ranch. The ranch was owned by Oscar D. Halsell, a Texan who saw promise in Doolin, teaching him to read, write, and handle basic arithmetic. Over time, Halsell even made him an informal foreman, a sign of the trust he had earned. For nearly a decade, Doolin worked on ranches across the region, building a reputation as both reliable and skilled. During these years, he crossed paths with several figures who would later become infamous outlaws themselves, including George Newcomb, known as Bitter Creek, Charlie Pierce, Bill Power, Dick Broadwell, Tulsa Jack Blake, Dan Clifton, called Dynamite Dick, and Emmett Dalton. Eventually, Doolin's life shifted from cowboy to outlaw. He founded the Wild Bunch, often called the Doolin-Dalton Gang, which, like the earlier Dalton Gang, focused on robbing banks, trains, and stagecoaches across Arkansas, Kansas, Indiana, and Oklahoma during the 1890s. On July 5, 1896, Doolin, Dynamite Dick Clifton, and 12 others made a dramatic escape from the Guthrie jail. Doolin fled to Lawson, Oklahoma to hide with his wife, while the others scattered across the territory. His time on the run was short. On August 24, 1896, Heck Thomas, a determined deputy U.S. Marshal, tracked him down. When Doolin refused to surrender, Thomas shot and killed him. Doolin's body was placed on public display in Guthrie. A local photographer captured 2 images of the deceased outlaw, which were later sold along with a memorial poem written by Doolin's widow and her brothers. The proceeds were meant to cover burial costs, though the government ultimately paid for embalming and burial to preserve the body for official identification. He was laid to rest in the Boot Hill section of Summit View Cemetery in Guthrie. His widow filed a $50,000 lawsuit against the U.S. Marshals, claiming wrongful death, but it was dismissed in February 1897. More than a year later, Dynamite Dick Clifton met his own end when U.S. Marshals caught up with him near Chakota, Oklahoma, on November 7, 1897, closing the chapter on one of the West's most notorious outlaw circles. Number 8. Cherokee Bill. He was born Crawford Goldsby, but history remembers him as Cherokee Bill, one of the most notorious young outlaws to emerge from the Indian Territory in the 1890s. Goldsby and his gang roamed the region for more than 2 years, accused of multiple robberies and the deaths of 8 men, including his own brother-in-law. His name quickly became known across the frontier. Eventually captured, he faced a second trial that lasted 3 days and ended with a guilty verdict. Isaac C. Parker, the famed hanging judge of the U.S. District Court at Fort Smith, sentenced him to be hanged on September 10, 1895. An appeal to the Supreme Court delayed the process, and for a moment it seemed his fate might change. But on December 2nd, the High Court upheld the original decision, and Judge Parker rescheduled the execution for March 17, 1896. Before a crowd of onlookers, Goldsby was hanged on that date at just 20 years old. When asked for last words, he reportedly said, "I came here to die, not to make a speech." His mother later claimed his body and buried him in the Cherokee National Cemetery near Fort Gibson. Over the years, stories of Cherokee Bill have continued to grow, marking him as one of the youngest and most infamous figures of the Old West. Number 7. Doc Holliday. He was born John Henry Holliday, but the world remembers him as Doc Holliday, a dentist turned gambler who became one of the most legendary figures of the American Old West, and a steadfast friend to lawman Wyatt Earp. Holliday is most famous for his role in the events leading to the gunfight at the OK Corral in Tombstone, Arizona. Popular stories once claimed he had killed more than a dozen men, but modern historians generally believe the actual number was likely between 1 and 3. His colorful life has inspired countless books and films, where he's often portrayed by Hollywood's biggest stars. Yet his story began far from the Wild West. At 20, Holliday graduated with a dentistry degree from the Pennsylvania College of Dental Surgery and opened a practice in Griffin, Georgia. Not long after, he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, the same illness that had taken his mother when he was 15 and his sister before his birth, likely contracted while he cared for his mother. Hoping a drier climate would slow the disease, Holliday moved west, where gambling was considered a respectable profession at the time. Over the following years, he developed a reputation as a sharp card player and occasionally found himself in tense confrontations. In Texas, he reportedly saved Wyatt Earp's life during a saloon dispute, sparking a lasting friendship. By 1879, Holliday had followed Earp to Las Vegas, New Mexico, then on to Prescott, Arizona, and finally Tombstone. There, he became a target of the Cochise County Cowboys, who spread rumors accusing him of stagecoach robbery and often threatened him. On October 26, 1881, City Marshal Virgil Earp deputized Holliday. That day, the lawmen attempted to disarm 5 cowboys near the OK Corral, and the encounter erupted into the now legendary shootout. Afterward, violence continued to ripple through Tombstone. Virgil Earp was severely wounded by hidden attackers, and Morgan Earp was killed. With the courts unable to bring justice, Wyatt Earp, now a deputy U.S. Marshal, formed a federal posse, deputizing Holliday to help track down those they believed responsible. The posse confronted Frank Stilwell as he lay in wait at a train station, and Wyatt Earp killed him. Local authorities responded by issuing arrest warrants for 5 posse members, including Holliday. In the following weeks, the federal posse killed 3 more cowboys before leaving for the New Mexico Territory. When an extradition request for Holliday surfaced, Wyatt Earp persuaded Frederick Walker Pitkin, the governor of Colorado, to block it, allowing Holliday to remain free. He spent his final years in Colorado, his health steadily declining. On November 8, 1887, Doc Holliday died of tuberculosis in his bed at the Hotel Glenwood at just 36 years old. A quiet end to the life of one of the West's most enduring legends. Number 6. Tom Horn. He was born Thomas Horn Jr. in 1860 and grew into one of the most skilled and most debated figures of the American Old West. Known for his sharp aim and relentless drive, he earned both respect and suspicion wherever his trail led. Horn first gained attention during the Lincoln County War in New Mexico, where he reportedly worked as a hired gunman for prominent cattleman John Chisholm. His calm under pressure and reputation for getting the job done earned him the nickname Tommy and made him a formidable presence on the frontier. His fame grew even more when he became an operative for the Pinkerton Detective Agency. Horn's unorthodox methods and willingness to push the limits of the law made him both admired and distrusted, viewed as a hero by some and a dangerous enforcer by others. Yet the moment that defined his legacy came years later with his controversial conviction for the murder of 14-year-old Willie Nickel. The case was built on shaky evidence, and many suspected that Horn's reputation as a ruthless agent for powerful cattle and mining interests made him an easy target. In 1903, Horn was executed, though questions about his guilt never faded. To this day, his story remains wrapped in mystery and debate, a lasting reminder of the complex and often shadowed realities of life on the frontier. Number 5. Butch Cassidy. He was born Robert Leroy Parker, but the world would come to know him as Butch Cassidy. In 1879, at just 13 years old, he lived with his family on Jim Marshall's ranch in Circleville, Utah, where a chance friendship would shape his future. There he met Mike Cassidy, a seasoned cowboy who became both friend and mentor. Mike gave young Bob his first firearm and taught him how to use it. Lessons that left a lasting impression. Years later, Bob adopted the name Cassidy as a tribute to his mentor. His first brush with the law came in a surprisingly harmless way. When he found a general store closed, he entered, took a pair of overalls, and left a note promising to pay later. Though the shopkeeper reported him, he was later cleared of wrongdoing, an early sign of the charm and boldness that would define his legend. By June 24, 1889, Cassidy's path had shifted. Alongside three partners, he robbed the San Miguel Valley Bank in Telluride, taking $21,000. With the proceeds, he bought a ranch near the Hole-in-the-Wall region, a well-known outlaw hideout. Many believe the ranch served less as a home and more as a front for his growing network of criminal activity. In 1896, Cassidy rose to lead the notorious Wild Bunch, a gang that included some of the most famous outlaws of the Old West. As with his close associate, the Sundance Kid, the mystery of Cassidy's final days lingers. Official accounts place his death in Bolivia, yet some family members long insisted he secretly returned to America, keeping the legend of Butch Cassidy alive long after he disappeared. Number 4. Thomas Coleman Younger. Cole Younger's life took a dramatic turn after tragedy struck his family. His father was killed following an altercation with Captain Wally of the Union Army, who had allegedly made unwanted advances toward Cole's sister. At the time, Cole had already ridden with Quantrill's raiders, but his father's death pushed him deeper into the conflict. He soon joined the Confederate States Army, fighting through the final years of the American Civil War. When the war ended, his path shifted toward outlawry. The first time his name appeared in connection to a crime was after the 1868 robbery of Nimrod Long and Company, a bank in Russellville, Kentucky. Before long, Cole and his brothers Jim Younger and Bob Younger teamed up with Jesse James and Frank James to form one of the most infamous outlaw bands of the era. Together, they targeted banks, trains, and stagecoaches across Missouri, Kentucky, Kansas, and West Virginia. Their luck ended on September the 7th, 1876, during a failed bank robbery in Northfield, Minnesota. Cole and his brothers were captured and later pled guilty to avoid execution. They were sentenced to life in prison, but were paroled in 1901 after serving 25 years. In his later years, Cole sought redemption. He toured the country alongside Frank James, sharing stories of their frontier days. Eventually, he embraced Christianity, renounced his former life, and lived out his final years peacefully, passing away in 1916 with 11 old bullets still lodged in his body, silent reminders of his turbulent past. Number 3. Billy the Kid. He remains one of the most iconic figures of the Old West, Billy the Kid. Countless books, films, and songs have celebrated his story, yet the truth was far less sensational than the legend suggests. Though often portrayed as a ruthless killer, those who knew him described him as brave, quick-witted, honest, and full of laughter. He drifted into crime more from necessity than from malice, and under different circumstances, many believed he could have led a successful and respectable life. Popular tales claim he killed 21 people, one for each year of his life, but modern researchers believe the real number was likely closer to 4. In 1877, he found steady work as a cattle guard for rancher John Tunstall in Lincoln County, New Mexico. Tunstall was locked in a bitter feud with local merchants Lawrence Murphy and James Doolin. On February 18, 1878, Tunstall was killed by Murphy's hired men while he was herding cattle, unarmed and alone. His death ignited what became known as the Lincoln County War. Fueled by outrage, Tunstall's ranch hands, including Billy, were deputized and issued warrants to arrest those responsible. They called themselves the Regulators. But political corruption ran deep. The territorial governor sided with Murphy, and soon the Regulators were branded as outlaws. After a daring jailbreak and several years on the run, Billy's story came to an end in 1881 when Pat Garrett, the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office sheriff, found and killed him while he was hiding in a friend's home. Over the decades, a few have claimed to be Billy the Kid or to have seen him alive afterward, but historians agree it is highly unlikely he survived or was misidentified. His legend endures, yet the real Billy was far more complex than the myths suggest. Number 2. Jesse James. He was born Jesse Woodson James in the September 1847 in western Missouri and would grow into one of the most legendary outlaws of the American Old West. During the American Civil War, Jesse and his older brother, Frank James, joined pro-Confederate guerrilla fighters, or bushwhackers, who operated across Missouri and Kansas. Under the command of William Quantrill, and Bloody Bill Anderson, they were linked to brutal raids against Union troops and abolitionist civilians, including the infamous Centralia Massacre in 1864. When the war ended, Jesse and Frank joined forces with the Younger brothers to form the James Younger Gang, a band of outlaws who would go on to rob banks, trains, and stagecoaches throughout the Midwest. Legends claim Jesse killed at least 17 men during his lifetime, though historians debate the exact number and believe some accounts were exaggerated over time. His life of notoriety came to an unexpected end in 1882, when he was betrayed by a fellow gang member and shot from behind while adjusting a picture on the wall. The dramatic fall of Jesse James marked the end of an era and the beginning of a legend that still echoes through Western history. Number 1. John Wesley Hardin. He was born John Wesley Hardin, named after the founder of the Methodist faith, and raised as the son of a Methodist preacher in Texas. But even in his early teens, signs of a turbulent path began to show. At just 14, Hardin stabbed a schoolmate who had been taunting him. A year later, while playfully wrestling with an emancipated man named Mage, he accidentally scratched Mage's face. The next day, Mage ambushed him on a path to retaliate. Hardin reportedly fired 3 warning shots, and when Mage still advanced, Hardin shot in self-defense. Mage died from the injury. Fearing he wouldn't get a fair trial, especially since many Texas state police officers were formerly enslaved and Hardin was viewed as a young ex-Confederate, he went into hiding. When police tracked him down, his brother warned him. Instead of fleeing, Hardin stayed and fought, ultimately killing 3 officers and slipping away. After several captures and escapes, he made his way to Abilene, Kansas, where he befriended legendary lawman Wild Bill Hickok. While staying at the American House Hotel, an odd incident added to his growing notoriety. Irritated by the loud snoring of the guest in the next room, Hardin fired 2 shots into the ceiling. The first startled the man awake. The second fatally struck him. Hardin climbed out the window and fled back to Texas. Years of skirmishes with the law followed until he was finally captured, convicted, and sentenced to 17 years in prison. While incarcerated, he studied law, earning a legal degree, and later practicing as an attorney after his release. In 1895, Hardin's tumultuous life ended abruptly when he was shot from behind while playing dice in El Paso, closing the chapter on one of the Old West's most controversial figures. And there you have it, 15 of the most fearless and unforgettable gunslingers to ever ride across the American frontier. Their stories blur the line between legend and history, showing just how wild the Old West truly was. Which of these legendary figures captured your imagination the most? Drop their name in the comments. We'd love to know who stood out to you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another thrilling tale from the American Old West.